That was certainly the most memorable warm-up to a lecture I've ever had in my life. And I will remember it for the rest of my life. So it's a great honor for me to open the Prince Mahidol Award Conference 2019 on the topic of the political economy of non-communicable diseases. To my knowledge, this conference is the first global health conference to include political economy in its title and as the frame for discussion. For this focus, I congratulate the organizers of Pmac. Once again, Pmac is pushing the boundaries of knowledge and debate, pushing the development community to confront uncomfortable themes, pushing all of us to reflect on the meaning of global health. Thank you, Thailand, and thank you, Pmac, for your innovations and leadership in guiding us to this topic. Providing an introduction to the political economy of NCDs in 20 minutes is daunting. Indeed, it is impossible. An academic discourse on political economy could go on much longer and would no doubt put many in this room to sleep. The theme of NCDs is similarly complex and multifaceted. So in this session, I'm going to touch on just a few top-level issues and look forward to 15 parallel sessions to debate details over the next 3 days and to comments from the distinguished members of this panel. The overall goal of Pmac 2019 is, quote, to foster and enhance global momentum for NCD prevention and control, unquote, using a political economy perspective. The organizers called this, quote, an unconventional outlook, unquote. I hope that in the future this perspective becomes conventional. Indeed, I argue that it must become an essential outlook. I have spent my professional career arguing for more attention to political economy, for more attention to political discussions of health policy, especially for low and middle income countries. Please note, I am not an economist, but rather a political scientist. Political scientists constitute a tiny disciplinary club in global health, while international health economists have a significant organization and a global meeting every 2 years. Nothing similar exists for health politics. The study of politics remains on the margins in the global health community, despite decades of scholarship, while economics and economic analysis are squarely situated at the center. This conference will contribute to placing political economy analysis more forcefully at the core of debates on global health policy. There are many definitions of political economy, and definitions have changed over time. This conference is not the right place to engage in a prolonged discussion of what we mean by political economy. Most people here are not interested in using the study of NCDs to advance the field of political economy. Instead, we are seeking to advance control of NCDs through the application of political economy concepts, methods, and theories. But some consideration of definitions is appropriate. In general, most definitions of political economy focus on how the distributions of political resources and economic resources affect something we care about: inequality, economic growth, some specific policy, who controls a country, or health. Political economy analysis typically involves considerations of power, along with interests, ideas, ideologies, and institutions. For this conference, let me suggest a definition of political economy based on my favorite definition of politics. This definition comes from Harold Lasswell. He used it as the title of his 1936 book. It appears here. Politics, who gets what, when, how. I like this definition because the words are short and concrete. They focus on actors, consequences, timing, and process. Lasswell reminds us that any process affecting the allocation of resources in society inevitably involves politics. It cannot be avoided. The same principle holds for NCD policies, since NCD policies seek to change who gets what in the health system and in society. So my suggested restatement for Pmac's theme is, how the allocation of political resources and economic resources affects who gets what, when, and how in relationship to NCDs. This is what we want to explore over the next few days. The topics covered in Pmac 2019 are vast. In my remarks, I will focus on Pmac's 3 sub-themes shown here and one key actor for each sub-theme. For determinants, I look at commercial enterprises and their role as drivers of NCDs. For social systems, I look at patient organizations and their role in creating solutions. And for governance, I look at government agencies and their role in changing the institutions and actions. In short, we cannot discuss the political economy of NCDs without examining these 3 actors and how they shape both the problems and the solutions for NCDs. And indeed, on this panel, we have representatives of people who have participated and led many of these different kinds of organizations. This is not the only possible approach to political economy analysis. There are other methods, other approaches, but I do believe that for this conference, it's both a good and useful approach. This disaggregates the whole of society concept into specific actors and their different political economy roles. It's necessary because there are so many actors that can obstruct and facilitate change for NCDs. Political economy analysis may be complicated, but it is possible. We should use political economy to learn from past situations in order to design strategies that facilitate the changes we seek in health systems. This is a core part of my message. This perspective distinguishes Pmac 2019 from other gatherings. Pmac 2019 pointedly states that scientific evidence about NCDs is not enough to improve health. Political economy analysis and strategies are also needed to make progress. So let's look at the first sub-theme. In global health today, the promotion of targeted taxes on harmful products, called sin taxes, ranks high on the agenda for addressing the determinants of NCDs. The taxes focus on particular products, especially tobacco, sugary beverages, and alcohol. These commercial products have health impacts on NCDs, affecting cancer, cardiovascular diseases, respiratory diseases, and diabetes. The new taxes promise a magical solution of 2 birds with 1 stone: increased flows of new revenues for the government budget and reduced disease burden and related health expenditure for the targeted NCDs. Recently, global policy attention has increased on sin taxes and NCDs, but that attention has tended to focus on the technical economic aspects of policy solutions and overlooked the political economy challenges of introducing sin taxes. Introducing sin taxes requires political economy analysis because there are huge commercial interests that benefit from the production, sale, and consumption of these products. Introducing sin taxes inevitably triggers a political struggle with commercial organizations. These industries have much greater economic and political resources than perpetually under-resourced public health advocates. Understanding when and how public health can win, despite powerful commercial forces, requires political economy analysis. Even for tobacco control, which has a long history of political struggle, the literature on political economy related to low and middle income countries is limited. A systematic literature review published in 2013 by Jesse Bump and a colleague found 2,500 potentially relevant citations, but only 8 papers had used political economy analysis to examine tobacco control in low and middle income countries. These papers showed that the primary opposition to taxation is transnational tobacco companies and their economically interested allies. One important contribution to understanding the political economy of tobacco taxes is examine Thailand's successful introduction of strong anti-tobacco measures in the 1990s, a paper done by political scientists Sombat Chantarvong and Duncan McCargo. Those legislative achievements in Thailand were described as, quote, something just short of a miracle, unquote. In addition, at the global level, important contributions have been made on international political economy of tobacco control by Kelly Lee and Jappe Erkart, but much more needs to be done at both national and global levels. What does this look like in practice? One example of this kind of analysis is research on the successful passage of a soda tax in Mexico. In examining this topic, Aaron James and colleagues show how advocates achieved success using political economy analysis to decide on strategies to promote the tax in Mexican society and push the tax through the Mexican Congress. It's equally important to understand how industry interests can overpower public health. Anthropologist Susan Greenhalgh recently demonstrated how the Coca-Cola Company created a non-governmental organization in China to shape scientific research and public policy over a 15-year period, as she put it, quote, making China safe for Coke, unquote, through a complex web of institutional, financial, and personal linkages. The group operated within China's CDC, shaping government policy on obesity in line with the company's corporate message, quote, that is activity, not diet, that matters, a claim that few public health scholars accept, unquote. My hope is that the discussions at Pmac 2019 will advance our understanding of the political economy of the commercial activities, commercial determinants of health, and point us toward actions that can promote public health. Subtheme 2. Here I focus on civil society groups that contribute to mitigating the social determinants of NCDs. Changing a health system's orientation often requires political struggle. Technical evidence is usually useful and frequently necessary, but evidence alone rarely produces sufficient system change. One key force for change comes from the people directly harmed by the existing system. One whole of society lesson from the world's experience with HIV and AIDS is the critical role of affected people in organizing social movements to change public policies. Social movements of people living with HIV/AIDS played catalytic roles in changing government rules, regulatory policies, healthcare delivery, accountability structures, public perceptions, and corporate decisions through direct action, public protest, political lobbying, and strategic negotiation. I am not suggesting that social mobilization of people who are directly affected by disease alone can achieve these policy changes, but I do believe that this civil political pressure is often a catalytic factor to change institution. The question is, how do less powerful groups in society go about changing the policies and narratives related to NCDs? Perhaps the world needs mobilization of those living with NCDs in order to change the political economy of NCDs and change resistant government and corporate policies. Think about breast cancer. Women with breast cancer and their families have been a major force worldwide in putting the issue on national policy agendas and compelling governments to devote more resources to screening, diagnosis, and treatment. Think about lung cancer. In social movements to promote tobacco control, people suffering from smoking-related illnesses have played important symbolic roles. In the United States, a former Marlboro man with lung cancer testified at the annual meetings of Philip Morris and became a potent symbol of the damage caused by cigarettes. These movements also helped change the social narrative about responsibility for NCDs. Social movements of patients may not be necessary for the advancement of each NCD, but I do believe that social movements can play a catalytic role in changing social values and narratives and in transforming government and corporate policies in ways that can advance efforts to address NCDs. These social movements also play a critical role in changing the stigma associated with NCDs, making it more acceptable to discuss private or family matters such as mental illness, cancer, and other NCDs as public issues. I hope that the panels and discussions at Pmac 2019 will help us better understand the political economy of social movements of NCDs. How can social movements effectively put specific illnesses on national policy agendas and compel changes in policies and resource allocations? Now let's look at the third theme on governance of NCDs. We know from social science that institutions are sticky and tend to resist change. Every social system is biased and resists reform. As political scientist E.E. Schacht-Snyder wrote, every system has a, quote, mobilization of bias, unquote. That promotes attention to certain issues and avoids attention to others. Thus, changing built-in bias, systemic bias, is not easy. This resistance to reform is also related to the concept of path dependency. Once a system adopts a particular policy or direction, it's difficult to change that policy because the system develops positive feedback loops and stakeholders develop strong interests in maintaining that particular distribution of benefits. At the global level, Richard Horton, editor of The Lancet, recently asked a pointed question: why has global health forgotten cancer? Horton draws a direct parallel to the history of AIDS, writing, the NCD community has become trapped in an ideology that privileges prevention over treatment. A similar mistake disfigured the early response to AIDS, he wrote. I hope the discussion at Pmac this year can help clarify how and why global health has forgotten cancer through political economy analysis and how that can be changed. The gap in global governance for NCDs is striking for international agencies. We have many declarations about giving higher priority to NCDs, but development assistance still provides very limited resources for NCDs, as shown in this slide. How are development agencies being held accountable for their calls to increase attention to NCDs and for their calls for more domestic resource mobilization? The political economy of holding multilateral organizations accountable is a critical topic for both research and action and for this year's Pmac. At the national level, the governance of NCDs is weak and confused. Many health systems are not oriented towards providing NCD-related services and remain focused on infectious diseases. Research by Corinna Mouchereau on 5 resource-limited health systems found very low NCD service availability and readiness. They all lacked trained health workers and essential medicines for NCDs, and these situations were distinctly worse in rural areas. In short, huge gaps exist between what is needed for NCDs and what is provided. The core challenge is transforming the existing health systems to meet changed patterns of disease. The NCD tsunami is no longer something to expect. The NCD tsunami has arrived, and most nations' health systems are not ready. In short, the epidemiologic transition is happening faster than the governmental transition. For example, Mexico, through reforms to its health system, has made significant progress in financing treatment for high-cost illnesses, including many NCDs, but many problems remain in the delivery of those services, as illustrated by the case of breast cancer in Mexico. The system confronts inadequate mammographic equipment for testing, low rates of screening coverage for Mexican women, scarcity of personnel trained to provide screening and read the tests, and concentration of treatment facilities in Mexico City. As a result, many women with breast cancer in Mexico enter treatment with late-stage disease, with lower probabilities of success and higher costs of treatment. In short, breast cancer in Mexico is still more lethal than it should be. Changing the political economy of government systems, the governance of NCDs, and making them work effectively is not easy. Countries in Africa confront similar challenges for cancer. Lack of resources, lack of equipment, lack of personnel, lack of priority, and lack of data all add up to late detection, limited capacity to treat, and large numbers of cancer deaths. Julie Livingston's ethnography of Botswana's main cancer ward tells this story in searing detail. Setting national priorities and organizing government agencies for NCDs are political economy processes that we need to understand better. Again, I hope that Pmac will help us understand these governance challenges for NCDs. So let me end with issuing a call to action message for Pmac. Let's move political economy from unconventional to essential in global health, starting with NCDs. Here are 3 specific suggestions. First, development agencies and foundations need to move from slogans and lip service to actions and financial support on political economy. Donors need to make funding available for political economy analysis in health reform loans and grants, and make these analyses a required part of health policy development. Second, global health researchers need to direct more attention to the political economy of NCDs. There is significant room for expansion in relation to academic theory, data collection, and case study analysis, and the documentation of real-world practices that work. Third, we need an accountability mechanism for assessing political economy analyses in practice and research. In effect, we need a mechanism that will improve the quality of political economy to assure effective action. These are doable efforts. In the short term, I urge focusing attention on the political economy of NCDs for the 3 actors I discussed: commercial companies, patient organizations, and government agencies. Focused attention will help us advance the place of a political economy in global health. This, in turn, will help us support people working at the front lines in health systems to address NCDs. In the future, I hope we will point to Pmac 2019 as a global turning point in promoting political economy as an essential contributor to global health and in identifying successful strategies to prevent and manage NCDs. Thank you very much.